The wind howled across the endless ice fields of Kythera, carrying with it the bitter cold that had claimed so many lives. Zara pressed herself against the metal hull of the crashed transport vessel, her 6 arms wrapped tightly around her thin frame. The purple skin that marked her as one of the Villani people had turned a deeper shade, almost black at the edges where frostbite threatened to take hold. She had been running for 3 days now. 3 days since the hegemony forces had discovered the hidden rebel base in the ice caves. 3 days since she had watched her friends and fellow fighters fall to the plasma fire of their oppressors. The transport ship she now sheltered behind had been her escape route, but engine failure had brought her down hard onto this desolate stretch of frozen wasteland. The ship's emergency beacon had died along with the pilot. Her communication device had been damaged in the crash. She was alone on a planet where the temperature never rose above -40 degrees, with limited supplies and no clear direction to safety. The nearest settlement was over 200 kilometers away across terrain that had killed experienced explorers. Zara pulled her thin survival cloak tighter around herself. The fabric was designed for short-term emergency use, not for extended survival in conditions like these. She could feel her body temperature dropping despite her best efforts to stay warm. Her people were from a warm jungle world. They were not made for ice and snow. She closed her 4 eyes and tried to remember the emergency protocols she had learned during her brief military training. Find shelter. Conserve warmth. Signal for rescue. The first 2 seemed impossible. The third was pointless since no one would come looking for a single rebel in this frozen wasteland. A sound made her freeze. It was different from the constant wind. Mechanical. Regular. Like footsteps crunching through snow. Zara pressed herself deeper into the shadow of the crashed ship and listened. The sound was getting closer. Fear shot through her body. If the hegemony had tracked her here, she was finished. There was nowhere to run on these open ice fields. She reached for the small plasma pistol at her hip, knowing that it had only a few shots left. Her hands shook from cold and terror. The footsteps stopped just around the edge of the ship's hull. Zara held her breath. A voice called out, speaking in a language she didn't recognize. It was followed by words in the common galactic tongue. Hello? Is someone there? I saw the crash from my shelter. Are you hurt? The voice was strange. Deeper than most species she knew, with an odd accent. But it didn't sound threatening. Still, she kept her weapon ready. Trust had gotten too many rebels killed. I know you're there, the voice continued. Your tracks in the snow lead right to this ship. I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Marcus. I'm human. Human. Zara had heard of them but never met one. They were supposed to be a relatively new species in galactic politics. From what she remembered, they came from a world with varied climates and were known for being surprisingly adaptable. But what was one doing out here in this frozen hell? Please, Marcus called again. This storm is getting worse. You'll die out here if you don't get proper shelter soon. Zara made a decision. Death from exposure was certain if she stayed where she was. This stranger might kill her, but at least there was a chance he wouldn't. She stepped out from behind the hull, keeping her weapon visible but not directly aimed at him. The figure that greeted her was unlike anything she had seen before. He stood upright on 2 legs like many species, but he was covered head to toe in what looked like thick, insulated clothing. His face was barely visible behind protective goggles and a face covering, but she could see skin that was a pale pinkish color. There you are, Marcus said, and she could hear relief in his voice. You look like you're freezing. Come on, my shelter is about half a kilometer from here. We need to get you warmed up before hypothermia sets in. Why should I trust you? Zara asked, her voice shaking from cold. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, he slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a thermal blanket. He tossed it toward her, keeping his distance. Because, he said, out here, we're all just trying to survive. Species doesn't matter when the cold wants to kill us both. Zara caught the blanket and immediately felt its warmth. It was clearly high-quality survival gear, much better than anything she had. she wrapped it around herself and felt some of her shivering subside. "What are you doing out here?" she asked. "Research," Marcus replied. "I'm a xenogeologist. I study ice formations and mineral deposits on frozen worlds. Been here for about 2 months now." He gestured toward the darkening sky. "But, right now, we need to get moving. This storm is going to get a lot worse before it gets better." Zara looked at the crashed ship behind her, then at the alien offering help. She had learned not to trust easily, but something about his manner convinced her that he was genuine. Maybe it was the way he had thrown her the blanket without hesitation. Maybe it was the fact that he could have simply taken what he wanted from her if his intentions were bad. "All right," she said. "Lead the way." Marcus nodded and turned to head across the ice field. Zara fell into step behind him, noting how confidently he moved across the treacherous surface. His boots seemed designed for these conditions, and he used a walking stick to test the ground ahead of him. "What's your name?" he called back to her over the wind. "Zara," she replied. "Nice to meet you, Zara. Try to step exactly where I step. The ice can be unstable, and there are hidden cracks everywhere." They walked in relative silence for a while, fighting against the increasing wind. Zara found herself impressed by Marcus's navigation skills. Despite the blowing snow that limited visibility to just a few meters, he seemed to know exactly where he was going. "How do you know which direction to go?" she asked during a brief lull in the wind. Marcus tapped a small device on his wrist. "GPS unit calibrated to Kythera's magnetic field. Plus, I've made this walk dozens of times." "You learned to read the land." Zara struggled to keep up with his pace. Her people were not built for this kind of endurance in extreme conditions. Her legs were shorter than his, and she was fighting against cold that sapped her strength with every step. Several times, Marcus had to slow down and wait for her. "Sorry," she gasped during one of these stops. "I'm not used to this kind of environment." "Don't apologize," Marcus said. "You're doing great. Most species wouldn't last an hour out here without proper gear. The fact that you survived 3 days is impressive." His encouragement helped her push forward, but she could feel her strength failing. The thermal blanket helped, but her core body temperature was still dangerously low. Her movements were becoming sluggish, and her thoughts were getting fuzzy. Marcus seemed to notice her condition. "We're almost there," he said. "Just another few hundred meters." Through the blowing snow, Zara began to make out a dark shape ahead. As they got closer, she could see that it was some kind of prefabricated shelter, partially buried in the snow for protection. Lights glowed from small windows, and she could see what looked like solar panels and a small wind generator providing power. Marcus led her to a sealed door and quickly worked to unlock it. The moment it opened, a wave of blessed warmth hit Zara's face. She stumbled inside and immediately collapsed to her knees as the temperature change shocked her system. The shelter was larger than it had looked from outside. It was clearly designed for long-term habitation, with sleeping quarters, a small laboratory area, and what looked like a well-stocked kitchen and medical station. Everything was organized and efficient. "Sit here," Marcus said, guiding her to a chair near a heating unit. "I need to check you for frostbite and get your core temperature up safely." Zara was too exhausted to argue. She let Marcus examine her hands and feet, grateful for his gentle touch as he checked for signs of tissue damage. His medical knowledge was clearly more than basic first aid. "You're lucky," he said after his examination. "No permanent damage, but you were getting close. Another hour out there and you might have lost some fingers." He brought her a warm drink that tasted unlike anything she had ever had before. It was sweet and warming, and she could feel it helping to restore her energy. "What is this?" she asked. "Hot chocolate," Marcus replied with a smile. "Human comfort food. We take it seriously." For the first time in days, Zara felt safe. The warmth of the shelter, the kindness of this strange human, and the relief of being alive combined to make her feel almost lightheaded. "Thank you," she said quietly. Marcus was removing his heavy outer clothing, revealing a more normal appearance underneath. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and brown eyes. His skin showed signs of cold weather exposure, but he moved with the confidence of someone completely at home in this harsh environment. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Like I said, we're all just trying to survive out here." He paused and looked at her carefully. "Though I have to ask, what were you doing in a transport ship? This isn't exactly a tourist destination." Zara hesitated. How much should she tell him? For all she knew, he might be sympathetic to the hegemony. But, looking at his honest face and remembering his kindness, she decided to trust him with at least part of the truth. "I was running," she said. "From people who wanted to hurt me and my friends." Marcus nodded slowly. The hegemony? The fact that he knew enough to ask that question told her a lot. "Yes," she said. "I figured as much. A lot of refugees have been passing through this system lately." He sat down across from her. "You're safe here, Zara. I don't take sides in political conflicts, but I won't turn anyone over to people who want to hurt them." Relief flooded through her. "How do you know about the refugees?" "Because I've helped a few others over the past months. Word gets around that there's a human researcher on Kythera who doesn't ask too many questions." Marcus smiled grimly. The hegemony doesn't pay much attention to scientific expeditions, especially ones run by species they consider primitive. "Primitive?" Zara asked. "Humans have only been in space for a few hundred years. Most galactic powers still see us as newcomers who don't really matter yet." Marcus's expression suggested he had mixed feelings about that attitude. "Sometimes that's useful. We can go places and do things without attracting much attention." Zara studied his face. There was more to this human than just a simple researcher, she was beginning to realize. "You've been helping refugees on purpose." Let's say that a person tends to develop opinions about governments that shoot civilians and destroy entire colonies just to make political points. Marcus stood up and moved to check some readings on his equipment. "But that's a conversation for when you're feeling better. Right now, you need rest and food." He prepared a meal for her using supplies from his well-stocked pantry. The food was simple but nutritious, and designed to help restore someone suffering from exposure. As she ate, Zara felt strength returning to her body. "How long have you been here?" she asked. "About 8 months total. I come and go, but this particular research mission has been my base for the last 2 months." Marcus checked the weather monitoring equipment. "And it looks like we're going to be here together for a while. This storm is going to last at least 3 days." 3 days? Zara felt a moment of panic. Every day she stayed in one place was another chance for the hegemony to track her down. Marcus seemed to understand her concern. "Don't worry. This shelter is completely off their detection grid. I made sure of that when I set it up. As far as anyone knows, this is just another empty ice field." "How can you be sure?" "Because I used to work for the Terran Defense Force before I became a researcher. I know how to hide from sensors." Marcus's tone was matter-of-fact, but Zara caught the implication. "Used to? Let's say I had some disagreements with certain policies regarding treatment of alien civilian populations." Marcus turned back to face her. "I'm much happier doing research now." Zara felt another wave of relief. This human wasn't just kind, he was someone who had actively opposed the kind of oppression she had been fighting. She was truly safe here. "What happens after the storm?" she asked. "That depends on where you're trying to go. I might be able to help you get there, depending on the location. The nearest settlement with off-world transport capability is New Thurion. It's about 200 kilometers from here." Marcus pulled up a map on his computer. 230 kilometers, actually. Across some pretty rough terrain. He studied the route carefully. "But doable if you have the right equipment and know the safe paths." "Do you know the safe paths?" Marcus smiled. "Zara, I've been mapping this entire region for months. I know every ice bridge, every stable route, every place to find shelter. If you want to get to New Thurion, I can get you there." "Why would you do that?" "You barely know me. Because, Marcus said simply, it's the right thing to do. And, because no one should have to face this kind of place alone. Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury. But, inside the warm shelter, Zara felt hope for the first time in days. She had found not just safety, but an ally. Someone who understood what it meant to stand up against oppression, and who had the skills and knowledge to help her reach safety. She looked at Marcus as he prepared a sleeping area for her, noting the efficiency of his movements and the way he seemed to anticipate her needs. This was someone who had clearly helped others before. Someone who had made it his mission to be a beacon of hope in a dark and frozen world. As she settled down to rest, Zara allowed herself to believe that she might actually make it off this planet alive. The storm outside was fierce, but she was no longer facing it alone. She had found a human who embodied everything she had heard about his species' legendary determination and refusal to abandon those in need. Tomorrow, when the storm passed, they would begin planning her journey to New Therion. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, she could sleep without fear. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a transformed landscape of fresh snow and crystal-clear air. Zara woke to the smell of cooking food and the sound of Marcus moving around the shelter with practiced efficiency. She felt better than she had in days, her strength restored by warmth, food, and real sleep. "Good morning," Marcus said, noticing she was awake. "How are you feeling?" "Much better," Zara replied, sitting up and stretching her 6 arms. "Thank you." "Good. We'll need you at full strength for what's ahead." Marcus handed her a steaming cup of the chocolate drink from the night before. "I've been studying the weather patterns and route conditions. The storm cleared out some of the unstable ice between here and New Therion, but it also created new obstacles." Zara joined him at his computer terminal, where detailed maps and weather data scrolled across multiple screens. The amount of information he had gathered about this region was impressive. "The good news," Marcus continued, "is that the clear weather is expected to hold for at least 5 days. That's more than enough time to reach New Therion if we maintain good pace. The bad news is that the storm shifted some of the ice formations in the Kethra Pass." He pointed to a narrow valley on the map that seemed to be the most direct route to their destination. "This used to be a relatively safe passage, but the seismic sensors I placed there are showing significant instability. We'll have to take the longer route around the Windhold Mountains." Zara studied the alternate route. It added almost 50 kilometers to their journey and took them through terrain that looked even more challenging. "How much longer will that take?" "An extra day and a half, maybe 2 days depending on conditions." Marcus zoomed in on specific sections of the route. "But it's safer, and there are several emergency shelters along the way that I've stocked with supplies." "Emergency shelters?" Marcus smiled. "I told you I've been helping refugees. Part of that meant establishing a network of safe houses between here and the major settlements. Nothing fancy, but enough to keep people alive if they run into trouble." Zara felt a surge of admiration for this human. He had clearly been planning and preparing for months to help people like her. The scope of his operation was far more extensive than she had realized. "When do we leave?" she asked. "As soon as you're ready. I've already packed supplies for both of us, and I have cold weather gear that should fit you." Marcus gestured toward a pile of equipment by the door. "But first, we need to talk about the dangers we'll face." Over breakfast, Marcus explained the various hazards they would encounter on their journey. Hidden crevasses that could swallow a person instantly. Ice bridges that looked solid but could collapse under weight. Weather that could change from calm to life-threatening in minutes. And, of course, the ever-present threat of hegemony patrols. "The last one worries me the most," Marcus said. "My intelligence suggests they've increased their search patterns in this region. They know refugees are using this route." "Your intelligence?" Zara asked. "I maintain contact with a few other people who share my philosophy about helping those in need. We keep each other informed about hegemony movements." Marcus's expression grew serious. "There's been increased patrol activity around the ice fields to the north. They're definitely looking for someone." "For me," Zara said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe they're just trying to shut down the refugee route entirely." Marcus leaned forward. Either way, we'll need to be extremely careful. I have camouflage equipment that will help us blend into the ice, but avoiding detection entirely will be our best strategy. After breakfast, Marcus helped Zara into the cold weather gear he had prepared for her. The clothing was clearly designed for human proportions, but he had modified it to accommodate her 6 arms and different body shape. The insulation was far superior to anything she had worn before. "This is amazing," she said as she tested the flexibility of the modified suit. "Where did you get equipment this good?" "I design and build most of my own gear," Marcus replied. "Standard issue equipment is rarely designed for the specific conditions you actually encounter in the field." Zara looked around the shelter and noticed details she had missed the night before. Much of the equipment showed signs of custom modification. The heating system was more efficient than standard models. The communication array was more sophisticated than what most researchers would need. Even the furniture had been adapted for optimal use of space and resources. "You're not just a researcher, are you?" she said. Marcus paused in his packing. "I'm exactly what I said I am. But I'm also someone who believes in being prepared for any situation." He met her eyes. "My background taught me that you can't always count on others for rescue. Sometimes you have to be your own solution." They finished their preparations and stepped outside into the bright morning sunlight. The transformation of the landscape was stunning. What had been a howling blizzard the night before was now a pristine winter wonderland stretching to the horizon. The air was so clear that distant mountain peaks seemed close enough to touch. Marcus checked his navigation equipment and oriented himself toward their destination. "We'll travel in single file, with me leading. If I signal for you to stop, you stop immediately. If I tell you to drop flat, you hit the ground without question. Understood?" "Understood," Zara replied. They set off across the ice field at a steady pace. Marcus moved with confidence across terrain that looked identical in every direction to Zara. He seemed to read the landscape like a map, choosing their path based on subtle signs in the snow and ice. For the first several hours, they traveled in relative silence. Zara focused on keeping up with Marcus's pace and stepping exactly where he stepped. She was impressed by his endurance. Despite carrying a heavier pack than hers, he maintained a steady rhythm that ate up distance without exhausting his companion. As the day wore on, Zara began to appreciate the full scope of the challenges they faced. The ice beneath their feet was constantly changing. What looked like solid ground could suddenly reveal itself to be a thin crust over a deep crevasse. The wind, even when light, carried a bite that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. "How do you stand it?" she asked during one of their brief rest stops. "You adapt," Marcus replied, checking their position on his GPS unit. "Humans are good at adaptation. It's one of our species' strengths." "I'm beginning to understand why the galaxy takes notice of humans," Zara said. "Most species would consider this planet uninhabitable." "It's challenging," Marcus agreed. "But not impossible. You just have to respect the environment and work with it instead of fighting against it." They resumed their journey, angling toward a line of low hills that marked the beginning of the route around the Windhold Mountains. As they climbed gradually upward, the terrain became more complex. Ice formations created natural sculptures that were beautiful but treacherous. It was mid-afternoon when Marcus suddenly raised his hand in the stop signal. Zara froze immediately, every sense alert. Marcus was looking up at the sky, his body tense. "Do you hear that?" he asked quietly. Zara listened carefully. Over the sound of wind, she could make out a distant mechanical humming. It was getting closer. "Patrol ship," Marcus said grimly. "We need to get under cover. Now." He led her quickly toward a cluster of ice formations that created a natural shelter. They pressed themselves against the ice and pulled white camouflage covers over their bodies just as the sound of the ship's engines grew loud overhead. Through a gap in their cover, Zara could see the sleek form of a hegemony patrol vessel moving slowly across the landscape. It was flying low, clearly conducting a detailed search of the area. Powerful sensors swept back and forth across the ice. The ship passed directly over their hiding spot and continued on for several hundred meters before suddenly stopping and hovering. Zara's heart pounded as she watched it begin to turn back toward them. Marcus was perfectly still beside her, but she could see him slowly moving his hand toward a device on his belt. The patrol ship came closer, its sensors now focused on their exact location. Then, just when Zara was certain they had been discovered, the ship's attention shifted to something else. It moved away toward the north and, finally, disappeared over the horizon. "What happened?" Zara whispered. "Decoy beacon," Marcus replied quietly. "I dropped it when we first took cover. It broadcasts the electronic signature of a crashed ship to draw their sensors away from us." Zara stared at him in amazement. "You came prepared for hegemony patrols." "I came prepared for everything I could think of," Marcus said. "When you're operating in hostile territory, paranoia is a survival skill." They waited several more minutes to make sure the patrol ship was truly gone before emerging from their hiding spot. The encounter had cost them time, but it had also demonstrated just how thorough the hegemony's search efforts had become. "They're definitely looking for you specifically," Marcus observed as they resumed their journey. "That level of search intensity isn't normal for routine patrols." "I was part of a major operation," Zara explained. "We managed to steal some important hegemony intelligence before the base was discovered. They want that information back." Marcus glanced at her. "Do you still have it?" Zara nodded, patting a secured pocket of her gear. "Everything we learned about their expansion plans in this sector. If I can get it to the rebel leadership, it could save thousands of lives." "Then, we definitely need to get you to New Therion," Marcus said with renewed determination. They traveled for several more hours before reaching the first of Marcus's emergency shelters. It was cunningly hidden in a cluster of rocks that looked like a natural ice formation from the outside. Inside, it was small but well equipped with basic survival necessities. "We'll rest here for the night," Marcus said as they settled in. "Tomorrow we tackle the most challenging part of the journey." Over their evening meal, Zara learned more about Marcus's background. He had indeed served in the Terran Defense Force, specializing in cold weather operations and survival training. His departure from military service had been prompted by orders to participate in a hegemony operation against civilian targets. "I couldn't follow orders that violated everything I believed in," he explained. "So I resigned my commission and found other ways to fight against oppression." "Don't you miss your old life?" Zara asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. "I miss the camaraderie. I miss having clearly defined missions and objectives. But I don't miss being part of a system that prioritizes politics over protecting innocent people." "The rebel movement could use someone with your skills," Zara suggested. "Maybe," Marcus said. "But, for now, I think I'm doing more good by staying independent. I can help people from all factions without being seen as a threat by any particular government." That night, as they took turns keeping watch, Zara reflected on the extraordinary human she had encountered. Marcus represented everything she had heard about human determination and refusal to abandon those in need. But he also embodied a level of practical competence that she was only beginning to fully appreciate. He had turned himself into a one-man rescue operation on one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds. He had anticipated every challenge they might face and prepared solutions in advance. Most remarkably, he had done it all not for personal gain, but simply because it was the right thing to do. As she watched him check their equipment and plan the next day's route, Zara realized that she was witnessing something that had made humans legendary throughout the galaxy. It wasn't just their courage or their stubbornness. It was their ability to see a problem that seemed impossible and simply refuse to accept that it couldn't be solved. Tomorrow would bring new dangers as they attempted to cross the most treacherous part of their journey. But, for the first time since fleeing her destroyed base, Zara felt confident that she would survive to deliver her crucial intelligence. She had found not just a guide, but a guardian who would not let her fail. The storm had been just the beginning of their challenges. But, with Marcus at her side, Zara was ready to face whatever the frozen world could throw at them. The second day of their journey brought them to the edge of the Windhold mountain range, where the terrain became dramatically more dangerous. Massive ice formations rose like frozen cathedrals around them, beautiful but treacherous. Every step required careful consideration as they navigated between hidden crevasses and unstable ice bridges. Marcus moved with the confidence of someone who had mapped every inch of this route, but Zara could see the increased tension in his movements. This was the section where mistakes could be fatal, and the margin for error was razor-thin. "Stay close," he instructed as they approached a particularly challenging section. "The next 2 kilometers require us to cross several ice bridges. Some of them will only support one person at a time." They roped themselves together and began the delicate process of crossing the first bridge. It was a span of ice barely 2 meters wide, stretching across a crevasse so deep that its bottom disappeared into darkness. Marcus tested each step before committing his full weight, then signaled for Zara to follow. Halfway across, the ice beneath Zara's feet suddenly cracked with a sound like gunfire. She froze as spider web patterns spread outward from where she stood. Marcus immediately dropped to his belly and began distributing his weight across a larger area. "Don't move," he said calmly. "The ice is starting to fail, but it's still holding. I'm going to anchor the rope, then you're going to move very slowly toward me." Zara's heart hammered as she felt the ice shift slightly beneath her. One wrong move and she would plummet into the abyss, possibly taking Marcus with her. But his steady voice and clear instructions helped her control her panic. Following his guidance, she carefully shifted her weight and took slow, measured steps toward safety. The ice held just long enough for her to reach stable ground before the bridge collapsed completely, sending massive chunks tumbling into the darkness below. "Well," Marcus said as they caught their breath, "that's one route we won't be using again." Despite the close call, he seemed almost matter-of-fact about the danger they had just survived. Zara was beginning to understand that this level of risk was simply part of the reality of crossing this frozen landscape. They continued through the mountain passes, encountering several more hazardous crossings. Each time, Marcus's experience and preparation made the difference between success and disaster. He had climbing equipment for sections that required rappelling down ice walls. He had ice axes and crampons for traversing steep slopes. He even had emergency bridge materials for spans that couldn't be crossed any other way. "How many people have you brought through here?" Zara asked during one of their rest stops. "You're the 7th, Marcus replied. 3 made it to New Thur-Ion successfully. 2 decided to settle at the mining colony we'll pass tomorrow. 1. He paused. 1 didn't make it. What happened? Hegemony Patrol caught us just 5 kilometers from safety. She insisted I save myself and complete the mission instead of trying to rescue her." Marcus's voice carried a weight of old pain. Her sacrifice saved 3 other refugees who were waiting at the next shelter. Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. "Do you think they'll catch us?" "Not if I can help it," Marcus said firmly. "I've learned from every mistake, improved every system. The route we're taking now is completely off their patrol patterns." As if summoned by his words, the distant sound of engines reached their ears. Multiple ships this time, spread out in a search formation. Marcus immediately led them to cover among the ice formations, but both of them knew that hiding would be much more difficult in the open terrain ahead. The patrol ships methodically searched the area for over an hour. Twice, they came close enough that Zara could see the weapons mounted on their hulls. But Marcus's camouflage techniques and choice of hiding spots kept them invisible to the scanning equipment. When the ships finally moved on, Marcus's expression was grim. "They're expanding their search grid. Someone really wants you found." "The intelligence I carry," Zara explained. "It includes details about a planned hegemony offensive that would destroy several rebel strongholds. Thousands of lives depend on this information reaching the right people." Marcus nodded. "Then, we make sure it gets there." They pushed harder for the rest of the day, taking more risks to make up for the time lost hiding from patrols. By evening, they had reached the mining colony that Marcus had mentioned. It was a small settlement built around geothermal vents that provided both warmth and power for the mineral extraction operations. The colony administrator, a gruff Torgon named Keld, greeted Marcus like an old friend. "Back again, human? You're becoming a regular fixture in our little corner of paradise." "Just passing through, Keld. My friend here needs to reach New Thur-Ion." Keld looked at Zara with knowing eyes. "Another refugee, eh? Well, you picked the right guide.
This crazy human has saved more lives than the rest of us combined. Over dinner in the colony's small common area, Zara met some of the miners and support staff.
Several of them were refugees who had decided to stay rather than continue to uncertain futures elsewhere. They spoke of Marcus with genuine affection and respect. "He saved my entire family," one of the miners told her. "Brought us through those mountains in the middle of a blizzard that should have killed us all.
Never asked for anything in return except that we helped the next person who needed it." Another miner nodded. "The hegemony patrols never bother with us.
Too small to matter, they figure. Makes this place perfect for people who need to disappear for a while." Zara realized that Marcus had created more than just an escape route. He had built an entire underground network of safe havens and supportive communities.
It was an impressive achievement for one person working alone.
That night, Kel provided them with a secure room and warned them about increased hegemony activity in the region.
"They've been asking questions about human researchers," he said. "Might want to be extra careful on the last stretch." The warning proved prophetic.
When they set out the next morning for the final leg of their journey to New Therion, they encountered evidence of intensive searching. Tracks in the snow showed where patrol teams had been conducting ground searches. Emergency supply caches that Marcus had hidden along the route had been discovered and destroyed. "They're definitely onto me specifically," Marcus observed grimly.
"Someone has given them detailed information about my operation. Maybe we should turn back," Zara suggested. "I don't want you to get captured because of me."
Marcus shook his head firmly. "The intelligence you carry is too important.
Besides, I've been planning for this possibility. I have one more route that they don't know about."
He led her off the established path toward a section of terrain that looked impassable. Hidden among seemingly solid ice walls was a narrow canyon that provided concealed passage through the final mountain barrier before New Therion. The canyon was barely wide enough for them to walk single file, and sections of it required them to squeeze through gaps that seemed impossibly tight. But it was completely invisible from above and shielded them from all forms of electronic detection. They were nearly through the canyon when disaster struck.
A patrol team on foot had somehow discovered the entrance and followed them in.
The sound of boots on ice and shouted orders echoed off the canyon walls behind them. "Run," Marcus said simply. They sprinted through the remaining section of canyon, no longer worried about stealth.
Behind them, Zara could hear their pursuers gaining ground.
The exit was visible ahead, but so were the muzzle flashes of energy weapons as the patrol team opened fire. Marcus suddenly stumbled and fell.
Zara saw the scorch mark on his back where a plasma bolt had struck.
He was injured, possibly seriously, but he waved her forward.
"Keep going," he shouted. "Get to the exit."
Instead of continuing her escape, Zara stopped and helped Marcus to his feet. His survival suit had protected him from the worst of the energy blast, but he was clearly in pain and having trouble moving.
"What are you doing?" he gasped. "Save yourself."
"No," Zara said firmly. "You didn't leave me to die in the storm, and I'm not leaving you now." She half-carried, half-dragged Marcus toward the canyon exit as energy blasts struck the walls around them. The patrol team was closing distance rapidly, and their weapons were finding the range.
Just as it seemed they would be overtaken, reinforcements arrived from an unexpected source.
Several miners from the colony, led by Keld himself, appeared at the canyon entrance with mining equipment that made effective weapons.
Their intervention provided the distraction needed for Zara and Marcus to escape. "Get them out of here,"
Keld shouted as his people engaged the hegemony patrol.
"We'll handle these bastards."
Zara helped Marcus stumble out of the canyon and across the final stretch of open ground toward New Therion.
The settlement was visible now, its lights beckoning in the distance.
But Marcus was weakening rapidly, and she could see blood seeping through his damaged survival suit. "I'm slowing you down," he said during a brief rest. "Leave me here and complete the mission."
"Stop talking nonsense," Zara replied. "We're almost there."
With tremendous effort, she managed to get Marcus moving again.
The last kilometer was a nightmare of supporting his weight while watching for signs of pursuit. But, finally, blessedly, they reached the outskirts of New Therion.
The settlement's security forces took them into protective custody and provided immediate medical attention for Marcus. His injuries were serious but not life-threatening, thanks to the advanced materials in his survival suit.
While he recovered in the settlement's medical facility, Zara made contact with rebel agents in New Therion.
The intelligence she carried was immediately recognized as critically important and transmitted to rebel leadership throughout the sector. 3 days later, Marcus was well enough to leave the medical facility. He found Zara waiting for him with news that the intelligence had already led to the evacuation of several threatened rebel bases, potentially saving thousands of lives. "The rebellion owes you an enormous debt," she told him.
"They don't owe me anything," Marcus replied. "I was just doing what needed to be done."
Standing together in the warm common area of New Therion's main habitat, both of them safe and alive, Zara reflected on everything they had been through together. Marcus had risked his life repeatedly to help her, had built an entire network to save refugees, and had never asked for anything in return.
"What will you do now?" she asked.
"The hegemony knows about your operation.
It won't be safe for you to go back to Kythera." Marcus smiled.
"There are plenty of other worlds where people need help. Plenty of other impossible situations that need solutions." He looked at her seriously.
"What about you? Will you go back to fighting with the rebels?"
"Eventually," Zara said. "But, first, I have an idea. You've proven that one person with the right skills and determination can make a huge difference.
Imagine what a whole organization could accomplish."
"You're talking about expanding the refugee network?"
"I'm talking about creating something bigger.
A group dedicated to helping anyone who needs it, anywhere in the galaxy. Independent of governments and factions, focused only on saving lives and protecting the innocent." Marcus considered this for a long moment. "It would be dangerous. We'd be operating outside all official channels, with no backup and no safety net. But we'd be free to help anyone who needed it, without political considerations," Zara pointed out. "And we'd have each other." A smile spread across Marcus's face.
"You know what?
That sounds exactly like the kind of impossible project that humans are supposed to be good at." As they began planning their new venture, both of them knew that they were embarking on something that would likely consume the rest of their lives. But they also knew that there were countless people throughout the galaxy who needed exactly the kind of help they could provide. Marcus had started his rescue operation as one person with a desire to make a difference. Now, with Zara as his partner and the foundation of their shared experience on Kythera, they were ready to take on challenges that span star systems. The frozen world had tested them both to their limits and forged them into something stronger than either could have been alone. They had found in each other the perfect partnership of human determination and alien perspective, united by a shared commitment to never abandon those in need. The galaxy was vast and full of suffering, but it was also full of possibility. And somewhere in the growing legend of human stubbornness and refusal to accept defeat, two unlikely partners had found a way to turn that legend into hope for anyone brave enough to dream of freedom.